From the Ben Pixel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Phone Booth Fighting, a weekly podcast discussing the world of mixed martial arts and beyond with myself, Richard Hunter, and the two-time UFC heavyweight champion. Your name is?
I'm Frank Mir.
I thought that was you. We do this each and every week for you guys, with you guys. The website is phoneboothfighting.com. That's where we have show merch. That's where we have past episodes. That's where we have our Amazon banner that you can click through to support the show. It's where we have our Patreon. And also, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, Google Play, wherever podcasts are available. If you would do us a favor, go on iTunes and look up Phone Booth Fighting. Click on those 5 stars. Give us that 5-star review. That is very helpful to us, and it doesn't cost you anything, and lets us know you're out there listening and supporting, and we can keep this thing going, and we would appreciate it. So with that being said, let's talk. Let's chat. I got to tell you, Frank, I had an interesting experience this week attending UFC 235 here in Las Vegas. It's weird the way it came about. Normally, I get a press credential, right? Now, through a combination of circumstances, I actually originally did not think I was going to be available to cover this fight, so I didn't put in for the press credential, and then some plans changed, and turns out I was, but then it was kind of too late because I didn't put in the request or whatever. So I was just thinking I wouldn't be at this one, and I'd watch it on television. So I go see, Friday night, I go see our friends Blues Traveler. They were playing at Brooklyn Bowl. So go in the dressing room, and John Popper is sitting there, harmonica player, Blues Traveler, previous guest on Phone Booth Fighting, firearm enthusiast. That's what you two bonded over. And he's sitting there, and he had said to me earlier, I'd gone down there earlier in the afternoon, like when they did their sound check and stuff like that. And he had said to me earlier, he goes, "Is there a boxing match going on or something?" And I said, "No, actually it's UFC." And he goes, oh. He goes, "Yeah, because our friend Kevin is in town running the sound or something." That's what he said, running the sound, like the guy was part of the production. And so, okay, well, that's cool. So we go see the show, go in the dressing room after the show's over with, and I walk in there, and John is sitting there with this guy. And he says, "Hey, this is Kevin I was telling you about." And I said to him, you're involved in the sound production for UFC?" And he just sort of very humbly says, or for ESPN, he just sort of very humbly says, "Well, I've gotten a little bit of a promotion, but, you know, I'm involved in it." Well, after talking to him, it turns out he's the guy that's like in charge of UFC for ESPN. Okay. He's not the sound guy. But in John's world, I think they knew him from years back, being involved in some sort of production. So to him, he was somehow involved in running the sound. So
Okay.
it'd be like, it'd be like going up to Dana White going, "So you're involved somehow in the promotion? You work in the promotions department for UFC?" So anyway, that was odd, but he didn't, he very humbly, I figured it all out in my brain. It wasn't like he goes, "No, I don't think so. I run the operation." He's, "Well, yeah, I've got a little bit of a promotion, but yeah." So anyway, he ended up giving me tickets.
Oh, nice.
He just goes, "Hey, are you coming to the fight?" And I said, "Well, normally I do, but I didn't get press." He goes, "Oh, here." He reached in his bag, gave me the 2 best seats I've ever sat in my life for a UFC fight. He goes, "Yeah, no problem, And I actually ended up sitting with him and a bunch of the ESPN people. And it was kind of interesting to watch from that side of it, because he kept getting up and running to the production truck to see how he was more concerned with the prelims that were actually airing on ESPN. I mean, once it went to pay-per-view, ESPN isn't dealing with that part of it, so he was kind of more relaxed watching the fights. But that was pretty cool. So I lucked out, and thanks to him for hosting me. Yeah, just from the production standpoint, it's interesting. He was cheering not the fights and not the outcomes, but the ideal lengths of the fights. So to him, he wanted fights to fall like, basically he wanted it to be, he wanted it to make Sports Center. That was the goal. So for the pay-per-view to end, he was calculating if this thing is over, if the main event is over by the time Sports Center goes on, that's his optimal idea. So he's basically just watching a clock going, okay, anything between like 2.5 and 3.5 rounds will be good. I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's how his brain works.
So he wasn't happy.
Well, no, I think he ended up being happy, and I can't remember exactly why. But I mean, I'm just sort of making that number up. I can't remember if that's exactly what he was saying.
Didn't both main events go the distance?
They did, yeah. He was real happy with it one way or another. So somehow it must have made Sports Center. But he was just sort of telling me like that's generally. It's almost like watching somebody who plays fantasy football watch a football game. They're not interested in the outcome so much as they are how these individual people are doing. So I did that. How was your weekend?
It was good. What did I do? I actually didn't have to leave town. Hung out with the kids. I think we went to the gym on Sunday. Wrestling tournament on Saturday.
Didn't you have some? Now, how's the kid injury situation? That you got your family is so athletic and so as a result prone to injury. I mean, you know, CPS would really need to understand how athletic the family is. Yeah. Otherwise, there would be concern over patterns. A
lot of bruises and black eyes in my household.
Right.
Yeah, Bella broke her leg skateboarding, and so I don't know if I mentioned on the show already.
Yeah, that happened not on the show you didn't say, but that happened a week or two ago?
Yeah, you know, I'm still pissed at myself for it because I hate skateboarding. I hate it with a passion for athletes. I admire guys that can do it, but to me, if you're going to skateboard, that's pretty much all you should do. If you're an athlete in any other sport, skateboarding is a retarded sport for you to play as a side sport, as an add-on. What you might gain out of some, you know, dexterity and agility and balance is not outweighed by the chance that more than likely, I mean, everybody I know that competes at a decent level has broken multiple bones. You know, their wrists, ankles, pop knees, you know, pop shoulders. I mean, they're constantly, you know, you're on a piece of wood that, you know, with wheels on concrete. And then you're trying to do crazy shit and drop into pits and all that type of stuff. So
I'm assuming she was not all padded up?
No. And you know what? And fuck, I didn't want them to skateboard to begin with. But her oldest brother, you know, Marcus, he's big time skateboarding advocate. You know, he loves it, and he's good at it. You know, he can go to skate park and, you know, do kick flips and all kinds of stuff, and he can grind and all that. And so they were kind of bonding with it, so that was a little bit of like lowered my guard. I'm like, well, you know, it's something for him and his sister, you know. And the other boys were all kind of, you know, going out front and skateboarding, and I was like, all right. And then they're like, we're gonna go to skate park. I'm like, all right. I don't really feel comfortable. Like, no, come on, Dad. And then Bella kind of nodded away at me, and I have a hard time telling her no because she doesn't ever do anything. You know, she never asked to go to a party. She's never asked to have a boyfriend. So when she does ask to do something, it's kind of hard to say no to her because it's like, well, shit, man, she's you know, near high a perfect child. And so I said, yeah, go ahead, you know, just don't do anything crazy, right? You know. So my definition of not doing anything crazy means only skate on flat surfaces that are, you know, no angles, no jumping on shit, no diving down.
Find a flat surface and go in a straight line.
Yeah. My daughter and I don't have the same interpretation of what crazy is. So all of a sudden, Marcus comes into the house, and our therapist, Ruben, was over. And it was actually working on Jennifer at that time because he brings over his table, does the cupping and all the stuff, you know, the ripping up fibers. And so Jennifer's lower back has been bothering her. So I worked the first half hour of therapy, and then I jumped off the table. And so Jen's there, and I'm sitting there just bullshitting. And then so Jen's feet are towards the door. She can't see when Marcus walks in, and he's like looking at me, like, you know, waves over. And it's kind of a known thing that Jennifer's definitely the authoritarian in our household. Yeah. I'm the nice guy. I'm more reasonable. I try to see the big picture.
If you got bad news to break,
you always break it to me.
Yeah.
You don't ever tell them. Which kind of sucks because now I've set myself up to where I have to be the middleman, you know? Yeah. Well, let's tell Dad what happened and he can tell Mom. I'm like, well, fuck, thanks. Yeah. And so, so Marcus is waving me over. So I'm like, oh, shit. So I get up and I walk out to the front. And there's Bella, you know, in tears, fucking in pain, in the front seat of the car. So at first I was like, well, fuck, I got Ruben here. So I run in, it was funny because Jennifer was like, I never speak to her like that. I'm like, get off the table. She's like, what? I'm like, get the fuck off the table. I hate, like, in a moment of crisis, if you hear the tone of my voice, I don't want to repeat myself. You know what I mean? If I say duck, fucking duck. You know what I mean? Like, we could talk about it afterwards about why I asked you to duck. I'd be like, well, I saw a guy with a rifle over there. I thought it'd be a good idea to get the fuck down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in the middle of, once my adrenaline dumps, I don't want to be questioned. There's just no time for it, And so so she jumped off the table, can see that Bella's in pain. We set her there, and then Ruben's looking at it, and he just like nods. He's not, he's a therapist. He's not a doctor, so he's looking at it. He's all, and I'm like, yep, fuck it. So I grab her. We go right back in the car, sprint down to the emergency room, or speed down. And, they take an x-ray, and luckily it was a perfectly broken bone. It didn't even break all the way through. It fractured, and it still was connected, so it doesn't have to be, didn't have to be reset in any way. Yeah. So the emergency room doctor came in. I was like, hey, it's perfect. He goes, look, what do you call it? I think he used the term reduction. I don't have to do a reduction, and I never heard that expression before. And I was like, a reduction? He goes, well, I'd have to reset it. I'm like, oh, I've heard that before, to reset something. He goes, yeah, we call it reduction now, or whatever. And so they give her like a soft cast, and so we go home. The next day I go to my orthopedic surgeon that does all my stuff, and, he looked at it, and we took another x-ray again, and he's all, it looks perfect to me. He goes, but, I'm a knee, hip, shoulder specialist. That's what he does, replacements. Those are his specialties. And he has an elbow guy in staff that, does elbows. He goes, we're not really ankle people anymore. He goes, I've done them. He goes, but it's been, years, which is funny. You just being humble and being like, hey, I'm not an ankle specialist anymore. Technology changes. I haven't been in that field. I haven't done an ankle surgery in 10 years. So he goes, even though it looks great, so he takes a picture of it and he sends it to a friend of his who's an orthopedic surgeon. And he's like, oh, no, you got to bring her in. I can't go off of a picture. And I'm sitting there going, well, you got an x-ray. Just send the x-ray. No, let me see her. Bring her in. So we go in, and we have to pay for that. And then the guy, I remember, that's why I won't mention his name, because it bothered me a little bit. The guy comes in, he's looking at it, and he goes, oh, okay. He goes, well, so we can schedule surgery for next week. And I was like, scheduling surgery? I thought it was perfect. He goes, well, no, we're going to, you can screw the bolt down. He goes, and look, I've seen this many times, and you break it. There could be some ligament damage on the inside. I'm like, could be some ligament damage. He goes, yeah, we're going to do surgery because there could be ligament damage. He goes, yeah, just trust me, the way she broke it, the way you're describing it. I'm all, wow, it's kind of funny. The last two guys are like, shit, if you have to break a bone, that's as perfect as you can break it. Yeah. There's no, you didn't break it all the way through. It's not even a full fracture. And so I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what are we screwing back together? You know what I mean? Like, to enforce? And so he goes, yeah, we'll put a screw and a plate on this side. He goes, and then while I'm in there, I can see if there's any damage here and we can fix it. I'm all, oh, okay. He goes, all right, I'll see you next week. I'm like, we can just get an MRI. I'm all, so you don't want to see the MRI before we schedule the surgery? Oh, but trust me, I've been there. I've seen this. I know what I'm talking about. So we leave, and Isabella's like, I don't want to get surgery. I'm like, we're not fucking getting surgery. Yeah. There's no way. So then I even spoke to another therapist who scheduled to go see another doctor. He goes, dude, you pay cash for everything, right? I'm all, yeah. He goes, just kind of smirked. He's all, homie wanted, what did he say? He goes, the guy probably wanted to take a vacation this summer. He goes, you were paying for like the new rims on his car. Yeah. He goes, some guys are just quick to go ahead and jump to surgery. It's needless. And I'm like, yeah, but that's fucked up. You're not talking about some 60-year-old guy. You're like, fuck it. Let me milk his insurance. He's not doing anything. I'm like, you're talking, I went in there, he'd never met me before. But I'm like, hey, this is my 15-year-old daughter. She's already won state a second time. We were going to nationals here next month. She is a world-class athlete. This is what she athleticism and a collegiate career are all in the picture, You're going to put screws and bolts in her ankle? You know what I mean? I understand if things are necessary. But the unnecessary, just to make money, I'm like, holy shit, that's fucking cruel, dude. You're going to mess my daughter up. So I just sat there and I'm just like, wow, like the bone's not even off. Like, why would you screw a bone that's still together? Because, even on certain pictures, you couldn't tell that the bone was broken. Yeah. Like straight on, her bone looks like it's one piece. You had to turn the side to see a line going through it. And they go, oh, see, there it is. There's the fracture. To me, it's like if you have to pinch your eyes and look from different angles, we're not talking about a separation of bones. I mean, in fact, I broke my fibula one time, and I never even went to the doctor for it, and it healed. It healed a little crooked. I got problems with the muscles around and stuff, but that I might have, in hindsight, wanted to fix. If they'd have sat there and pointed, and if I had been smarter at the time, going, "Hey, man, your bones aren't connected. We need to reconnect them, and then they'll heal properly." All right, fine, I'll go into the knife. And, you know, I've had, I probably have had up to 10 surgeries at this point in my career. They're all athletically, you know, like between knee, shoulder, elbow, multiple knees and hip. I've been under the knife, so I'm not against it. I just think that, you have to be careful. You know what I mean? Like, people are just too quick to just, you know, start slicing things open. I'm like, you know, that brings its own set of issues. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and I remember, I guess it's some sort of adult rite of passage everybody probably has at some point, and I can't tell you exactly when it occurred to me, but I do remember the realization at some point in my early adult life where I realized that doctors, lawyers for that matter, you know, there are these like high-level professions that you maybe not everybody does, but I think you just sort of grow up with an assumption of, well, you can't ever tell them something. They tell you stuff, you know what I mean? And I remember the first time where, you know, and maybe it was like a lawyer, but, you know, where I was looking at something going, oh, but what about here? What about, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. Okay, you know, different direction. And sometimes the same thing with doctors where you're like, it didn't occur to me that that a doctor could be telling you something for any other reason other than this is what's going to make you the healthiest, you know. And then you start factoring in things like, the thing I always think about is like prescriptions where, you know, pharmaceutical reps are outside the door, you know, giving them.
That's why I like my general practitioner. This was probably years ago, but it was one of the times I fluctuated high up in my weight, and it was also during one of the times I had blood work done. And so it's the AC1, whatever one is an indicator that you might start becoming diabetic, as far as like, okay, your insulin levels, sugar levels are out of whack. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the doc, and he goes, hey, look, man, he goes, you're borderline high on this number. He goes, that's, you know, he goes, you're obviously, you know, you just fought, you know, 6 weeks ago. I can see you said you've put on 20 pounds. You've probably been living the good life. I'm like, yeah, I've been eating like shit. He goes, so I don't know if this number's real, you know, indication of where you're at, but you need to, you know, let's turn this shit around, start training again. And, you know, he goes, I was like, oh, okay. And there was a mention of, we'll just take, it was like a B6 or something. It was like, he goes, hey, it's going to flush you. It's a B vitamin. It'll help absorb this, you know, he explained. He goes, and look, he goes, and basically throughout the conversation was talking about it, was that there was a actual prescription drug that I could get on. I think I mentioned it because I had a friend that goes, oh, my friend takes this. He says he lost weight. He goes, yeah, it's prescription. I was like, uh-huh. He goes, no, just take the B vitamin. I was like, and in my mind, I'm thinking they're like, okay, here's a doctor. He goes, look, I'm all about, you know, he goes, look, homeopathic medicine obviously is for fucking, you know, I'm not going to insult anybody, but whatever. But, you know, there's a time where there are natural things, you know, like, you know, taking garlic on a regular basis, you know, good for your immune system, you know, but at the same time, you know, if you have MRSA, I'm not going to rub fucking garlic on the shit. You know what I mean? And that's how he basically came to me. He goes, there are times when there are natural, you know, remedies in nature that are beneficial, that you're not far enough down the line that you need to have a chemical put in your body that's man-made. Whereas, you know, there are times when it is necessary. He goes, you know, you come in here with a staph infection, I'm not going to tell you to rub fucking liniment oil. And I mean, like tea tree, it's time for me to get you on a strong antibiotic, you know. But at the same time, you know, he's one of the first guys too that first started telling me, he goes, hey, you know, there's a difference in a cold. You know, if you have a viral cold, he goes, and your doctor's giving you, you know, antibiotics, that's stupid. And just, why? He goes, viral. It's viral. What is antibiotics going to do for a virus, you know? And so very much like, you know, hey, man, go home, rest, you know, drink plenty of fluids, and your body's going to fight through it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I always like him, and that's why I've always, and even Crevetti, my orthopedic surgeon, I'll name his name. So like amongst the many injuries I have, one of the newer ones is now I finally did it to my left shoulder. I tore my labrum, right? And so I went in and I seen him. I'm like, hey, shoulder's hurting. Now they used to be the good shoulder, and now it hurts just as bad as my other shoulder, which it's been torn for a long time. So he's looking at it and he's like, well, no surgery. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, why do you say that? He goes, lack of range of motion. He goes, look, really honestly, it's just pain for you right now. He goes, your tendons, because I did an MRI. He goes, everything is locked up to where you could push and you're not going to rip your shoulder. You don't have a rotator cuff issue. You have a labrum issue. So the cartilage is keeping the fluid in there. He goes, it's going to speed up the fact you're going to have even more arthritis as you get older. He goes, we have another set of issues we'll have to deal with once you retire. He goes, but for right now, he goes, if I stitch your shoulder back together, he goes, it's going to be tighter. It's going to be less range of motion. He goes, do you really need that? So in here, the guy could go ahead and bang out and make 15 grand, give me a surgery, but instead turn me down. He goes, no, I don't think it's a good idea for you. Knowing you as a person, knowing what you do, me stitching your shoulder back together is no good. He goes, go do plenty of PR and rehab and just, push yourself, because nothing's damaged that you could hurt worse.
Mm-hmm. I know. I wish they were all like that. It is a crazy thing to realize that you have to always be thinking about, well, what's the motivation here? Is this pure, or is there an agenda here?
God, let's say you have to be with doctors and your mechanic.
Yeah, that's
and your handyman.
One. Yes.
Because we've talked about that before on the show. Handyman will fuck you over. That's why my handyman, I'm not changing from him. And then even my mechanics, I only use the same ones. I'm friends with everybody over at the dealership, and that's the only one. I mean, I'll drive past 30 of them to go back to them, because I just know. Here's how one. I got into a wreck, and so the insurance paid to fix my car. And so I was driving, and it fucking drove like shit. There was something wrong with it. So I took it to them. I wish I just would have known that I could have told the insurance agency, fuck you, I wanted to go there, but I took it to their shop. So Doug from Cadillac comes out and he goes, oh, no, there's no problem. We'll just pay for the time. But he goes, nothing needs to be fixed. He goes, they just didn't bolt the shit down. I'm like, oh, thanks. And I thought that was kind of cool. And that was like another indication of like, oh, I'll always take my car back here, because I don't know shit. You could have told me, oh, there's a strut bent. Here's $4,000 worth of damage that you have to fucking pay for now. And all they did was screw down a couple bolts. I mean, they charged me for the time. He goes, look, got to pay the mechanic that did it, but other than that, you don't have to pay for anything.
It sucks. It's any time that you're having something done where you cannot visibly see the finished result to judge for yourself. And what I mean is, I may have said this a couple of weeks ago, but having to deal with the roofer situation right now. Well, I just put a new washing machine in the house. If that's not working, I can see it's not working. It won't turn on, or the water doesn't pour in, or the clothes don't get clean, But if it's a roofer, what's going to happen? A roofer's going to go up there, and when he comes down, I'm going to go, well, did you secure the roof properly? And he's going to go, yeah. I'm going to go, all right, cool. Like, how do I know? I'll find out if if the roof leaks, but that's a ways down the road. Anyway, all right, well, more home improvement talk on a future episode of the show. We got to give credit to our guest from last week, Kamaru Usman. This guy, he was the underdog to Tyron Woodley. Not a lot of people were picking him.
I didn't.
And good Lord, did he dismantle Tyron Woodley.
Yeah.
50-44 on two of the scorecards. I mean, it was, and, Tyron Woodley's one of the all-around best, one of the greatest welterweights champions of all time. I mean, it's not that you can speak negatively about him so much as you can say that Kamaru Usman was not getting the credit he deserved until Saturday night. He's the new welterweight champion, and man, I can't say enough about how impressed I was by that performance. I mean, he took Woodley down. He kept him there. He just, I do remember saying when we were talking about this, I said, well, maybe the opportunity for Usman is to pressure Woodley, because a lot of times Woodley tends to be tactical. But what I thought was that if he did, he'd have to get a finish. Something would have to happen within the early rounds of the fight. But this was just a grind, and you really saw that after a couple of rounds, Woodley certainly didn't give up, but it did sort of look like he didn't really have a plan B in mind. It was kind of like and you know, I mean, I'm speculating. Tyron Woodley didn't tell me this, but just from appearances, it did look like, you know, what he knew to work was not working, and he was going to keep trying to get it to work, but there wasn't really a plan B involved that I could tell. And man, Kamaru Usman is he has arrived.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're training for a fight and people are talking about it, when people think you're going to lose or they don't give you much credit, it can inspire you. And on the flip side of that, sometimes when everybody's like, well, you're gonna kick this guy's ass, what's coming after that? And even though you know don't do that, don't overlook somebody, it does calm you down into your training. And then when you figure out that you may be in there with a beast that's a little bit more dangerous than everybody else thought, and now you're the one paying the price, it's too late to try to remedy that problem. Like, that's an issue that, you know, you failed at 8 weeks previously, you know, not training it. And I understand. I mean, shit, I think anybody at a high level, very few people have not made that mistake. And as far as judging that Woodley was going to easily win the fight, I mean, I thought, I even had, you know, my barber text me about an hour before the fight started. And he's like, you know, who do you take? And I'm like, oh, the champs, easily. And fucking, I thought it was going to be 2 boring fights. Yeah. That were going to be just a dominant performance for both the title holders. So I couldn't have been more wrong in the Woodley case.
You know what makes for an interesting fight? It's because I guess maybe under different circumstances, not everybody's going to be entertained by the Usman-Woodley fight. But I always think it's interesting if you've got a preset dynamic going into a fight where one certain thing is supposed to happen, and then you very quickly see that it's the opposite of what's expected. I find it compelling just to watch. You know, the thing I'm watching for now is Woodley going to be able to turn this around? I mean, every time a new round started, you're like, okay, well, he's not on the ground. You know, Usman isn't on top of him. Usman didn't hold him down yet because we just started the next round on the feet. Is the same thing going to happen, or is Woodley come on? And he tried. I mean, you know, there were later in the fight you could see he was coming out more aggressive, you know, realizing what was entirely possible if Usman were to get him down. And I always think that's interesting because it just adds a whole new dynamic to a fight. You know, as opposed to if it had been what everybody had anticipated, maybe there wouldn't be so much interest. But when you just, it's like a surprise ending. I mean, when you're just seeing, you know, you're expecting.
Yeah, I think most people were entertained. I think that.
No, I thoroughly.
I think that. I don't think anybody could say they were bored the first 2 rounds because of that initial shock. Yeah. But then I did kind of gather from people I was around that by the time the 3rd and 4th round hit, they're like, all right, fucking, I wish this fight would be over. We'll just give it to, all right, you know, obviously Woodley's not going to be able to defend this, and Usman isn't going to do anything more than what he's doing, which, you know, was winning each round. But there was no submission or knockout in the water, and it became one of those almost like football games that are a blowout. We're like, all right, we're going into the 4th quarter, and it's 40-point lead. Can we just go home? You know what I mean? Like, this is boring, you know?
In some ways, it overshadowed the main event, in my opinion, because of what Usman was able to do. But the main event had its own set of dramatic circumstances. John Jones retains his light heavyweight title in a decision win over Anthony Smith. But the compelling thing about this fighter, the element of drama, came late when Smith took an illegal knee. And from where I was, I couldn't tell right away if it was for sure illegal. It was, you know, one of those situations where just as Smith's knee was coming up, Jones fires a knee. He'd been throwing knees to the body. This one landed into the head. And Herb Dean called time and actually deducted 2 points from Jones per the rules. I guess that's what he has to do. If he determines that the knee was of consequence, could affect the outcome of the fight, but the fight's going to continue, he's got to take the 2 points. Jones was so far ahead on the scorecards, the 2 points didn't end up affecting the decision. But here's where I think the James Horn doppelganger Anthony Smith deserves a lot of credit. Well, two things. One, going the distance in a fight that he just never really seemed to have any momentum in. But 2, how about this, Frank? He could have taken the DQ win. He could have said, I can't continue. and John Jones would have been disqualified. Anthony Smith would have got the win. A lot of people probably would have looked at it kind of like the Matt Hamill win over John Jones. But the difference being that there would have been an immediate rematch.
Right.
It would have headlined a pay-per-view. There would have been, not only would Smith have gotten the win money from this fight, his next fight would be a guaranteed pay-per-view headliner, big-time payday. I mean, all the things he could have gotten by, and I'm not saying he wouldn't hurt. I mean, he wouldn't have even had to lie. Maybe he would have just gone, yeah, my head really hurts right now. This is probably going to affect the rest of the fight, and yeah, I don't think I can continue. And he didn't do that. I mean, to me, that was a real example of integrity.
Yeah. I think that he showed that, you know, not only was he a tough guy by dealing with the circumstances of the fight and withstanding all the way to the end, but in that situation, he chose to be a tough guy and take the honorable route than to look for some type of hole in the wall and just say, okay, well, and you're right. I mean, knowing that he could take the victory, the fight's going to be over with, no more punishment coming his way, and he technically gets to be the champ.
Yep.
Talk about not only money that for the next fight, all the things that you brought up, but from then on, you know, 20 years from now, when he goes to make an appearance somewhere, he doesn't just put a guy who fought for the title, but he gets to put down, I was the light heavyweight champ of the world. Now, people will sit there and go, well, you know, you won it because of this or won it because of that. But time fades a lot of things. That's why people always say people don't really remember wins and losses as far as the circumstances around it. Not a lot of people will remember, or, you know, the general population will forget, and it'll always be some that remember. But he gave up a lot of things that he could have had if he just would have, you know, had less integrity than he obviously possesses.
Yeah, and even the fact that he wasn't already an established superstar. Like, it's not like he was Daniel Cormier, who, even in a loss to John Jones, is still going to go on to have, you know, main event fights and stuff like that. I mean, I think Anthony Smith has a bright future. I'm just saying he wasn't already at that level where he didn't have that to gain as well. I mean, to be guaranteed that that next fight would obviously be a rematch against, you know, the considered by me to be the greatest of all time. Anyway, I thought that deserved a lot of credit for the fact that he did that. What do you think about John Jones not finishing the fight? Anthony Smith was tough as they come, certainly, to withstand that, but it did go through my mind that, you know, because we consider John Jones to be on a different level, I think there is a point in a John Jones fight where if he is totally dominating half of the fight, now you're kind of looking for it not to go the distance.
Yeah, I think that if you look at most of John's finishes, they're by submission. He has a lot of submissions at light heavyweight. And then when he does finish guys in ground and pound, he gets into a position where he's able to lay into them. You know, the Gustafsson, he had one hook in, kind of a cross body ride, wrist control, and was able to, you know, basically from the side beat him up pretty hard and land a lot of shots. I think that it's going to be more difficult for John to finish people as his career goes on, especially like OSP, he didn't finish, right? And I also think that, you know, not finishing Smith is not a surprise. I could put it in jiu-jitsu terms for you here. It's kind of like rolling with a really good black belt, right? I sometimes will have a really difficult time tapping a blue belt that comes in. Want to know why?
Why?
Because his only concern in life is not to tap to me. He doesn't care if I sweep him, if I get on top. In fact, I'll get in positions and now they just grab their collars and put their elbows down, and, you know, and they're just, I just don't want to tap. They're losing. They're getting mauled as far as points and positioning, but they never ever expose themselves. And so I think that's something in the fight that kind of happened, was that sometimes guys start fighting and their mindset is, I'm just going to survive to the end of the round. It's harder to beat a guy, or it's harder to finish a guy who's just trying to make it to the end.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like if you and I are fighting and your only concern is that I just want to last 3 rounds. Well, if I'm trying to beat you, yeah, I'm winning, but I have the mindset of going over you. That's why you get upsets where guys, I'm trying to win, you're trying to win. We overextend, we make mistakes. There's adrenaline pumping. You know, I dive in for a shot, I expose my neck. Well, that exposure then causes, you know, turnaround. But when you get guys that are just like, well, I'm just going to, you know, maintain the pace, and, you know, I'm going to be losing, but I'm not going to do anything that puts me in a really bad position. I'm not going to take any huge risks to get up to my feet. And I think that's when people started seeing that with Anthony Smith. They're, you know, like, well, why, you know, he's not trying anything different. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. I'm all, because he's just surviving. You know what I mean? I guarantee there was probably a point in that fight where it clicked in his head, you know, could have been early on, that, fuck, I can't beat this guy. But I'll be damned if he finishes me. And in itself, I mean, some people might sit there and go, well, if you're not trying to win, that's kind of quitting too. But then there are other people saying, well, that's admirable. You sit there and go, well, you know what, I can't win, but you're not knocking me out or finishing me. I'm just going to take my ass whooping for the next, you know, 3 or 5 rounds, however the fight may be.
Yeah, and I would also submit that the lingering consideration on a lot of people's minds is not that. It's that John doesn't finish the fight. I mean, when you're talking about that class level, I don't think a lot of people look at the guy who's the big underdog going, well, look at this guy just surviving. People look at the guy who's the overwhelming favorite, greatest of all time, and going, I think he probably should be finishing this fight. I mean, that's
well, I mean, and Anthony Smith is in there, so it isn't like they just pulled him off a bar stool.
Right.
The guy's an extremely capable martial artist. And once again, if you fight another guy who you're better than, and it's hard. I don't know any better way to explain it than I have, but in the gym. But, you know, in boxing, I've gone against guys that are much better boxers than I am, obviously, that are professional boxers. And there's times where, like, you know, if I'm not getting ready for a fight, I'm just a partner, and now it's time to return the favor. I'm just a sparring partner. I look better than probably what people think that, you know, because people could look, oh, man, you're holding your own in there. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really trying to go after the guy. I guarantee you if you said, hey, knock that guy out, I'm going to expose myself, and then that guy's skill level is going to show the difference why he's a professional boxer and I'm a professional mixed martial artist. But if you sit there and I go, oh, I just stayed behind my jab, kept my head a little bit movement, you know what I mean? I didn't throw that many fucking backhands because I knew that every time I fire a backhand, my weight's exposed, that if he wants to move off and counter me. So I was basically jabbing, hooking, only threw punches when it was safe. I lost every round, you know, but it was slow, undramatic losses.
Yeah. The the feature bout, which was the UFC debut of undefeated Ben Askren against Robbie Lawler. Spectacular while it lasted. Less than a 1 round, 3.5 minutes to be exact, before Askren was able to stop Lawler. Now, this fight had controversy as well, but let's talk about the beginning of it. First of all, how about Askren surviving one hell of a barrage to start this round?
I don't remember. Did he get spiked directly on it? Because he shot in, and I know Lawler picked him up, and he went to the other side. I think he even tried to grab a Kimura.
Yeah.
And it seemed like
it was like, it reminded me of the way that Cormier threw Dan Henderson around. Yeah, I mean, and then the, you know, the vicious ground and pound for which, you know, Robbie Lawler has those, you know, has some heavy power. Started laying into Askren on the ground. Askren survives that. Now we move to the middle of the round, where Askren gets that bulldog choke on Lawler. The controversy was this, that Herb Dean is looking for Lawler's consciousness at this point. And there was a point, a second before Dean stopped the fight, that Lawler's right arm dropped. And I've got to tell you, when I was watching it, I thought he had gone out. When I saw that, kind of just because it was like a limp fall, right? Now, later on, you see different angles. You can see that Lawler at some point gave a thumbs up, maybe like a second after that. Dean still stopped the fight. Lawler popped right up, you know, protested, hey, I was fine. I thought, could that have been a situation where he was out for a second and then he came back, you know, woke back up? I don't know. What did you think it was?
Well, I thought that One, this goes on the theme that I've been screaming for the last couple of years now. We stop fights way too fucking early. And that's not the referee's fault. I think that's the pressure from the athletic commissions on the referees to make sure that a guy doesn't eat one extra shot, or if he's not in a choke. And, John McCarthy and I have had this disagreement on fights being allowed to go a little bit farther. Now, I understand that maybe when we talk about punches and concussions that guys are going to be very leery of allowing you to take an extra shot or two. But again, I think that's better than robbing a guy of his camp and all his effort and hard work because you stopped too early. I'd rather it be stopped too late. And in this situation, especially with chokes, I mean, we know that medically chokes are not that dangerous. I mean, thousands of kids are practicing jiu-jitsu right now and getting choked out and no one's dying. It's just getting the blood stopped to the brain and having it relieved, as long as it's within a few seconds of once the choke is fully, I mean, you can be unconscious for 5 seconds and I'm bearing down on a choke, count to 5 and I'll let go. You're still going to wake up. You know, it might take you 10, 15 seconds, but consciousness will return once the blood flow is stopped from being restricted. So now I was watching the fight, the way the arm limped out, I completely understand why Herb Dean goes, oh, he's out. What I think was happening, the reason why the arm fell down, was that Robbie was going out. That's why his body, the way he moved, it wasn't like he put his hand down. His hand flopped down. That flopping down is, I feel, is indication of a lack of consciousness. You're starting to lose consciousness, as in the room is starting to close in on you. But Herb Dean stopped it at that point. I think that if Herb would have just let it go for another couple seconds, then he's pulling Askren off of Lawler, has to wake him up, and it's going to be very obvious that the choke was on, you know, and it was an effective choke. So I don't think that the outcome of the fight was ruined by Herb's movement. I think that Askren wasn't letting that, and the guy's a 3-time national champion wrestler. His tensile strength to hold that choke, he's going to hold it. As powerful as Robbie is at throwing punches, I'm willing to bet Askren can hold a choke for is equally as dominant in that world.
Kind of like was it Mike Chiesa and Kevin Lee?
Yeah.
Remember that?
I wasn't out. Your arms dropped down. I'm like, well, that's not a way to defend it. You were going out.
Yeah.
You might not have been fully out yet, but you were going out. So I say let the guy fall asleep. But here's the problem. And this is why it's easy to play fucking Monday morning quarterback, right? Let's watch this whole thing again. So everybody sees the hand drop, and let's say Herb doesn't do shit. He just sits there and stares. Now maybe he reaches in, grabs one of Robbie's hands, which is kind of difficult to do at that point because he's in a he's in a turtle position, referee position. If he's on his back or another position, you can kind of grab arms and kind of sit there and go, hey, are you there? So he sits there and waits to see, and he's trying to see, can't see, doesn't see, lets it go on for another 5 to 7 to 10 seconds, then stops the fight, pulls Askren off of him because Robbie falls into a heap on the ground, and now he's unconscious for a minute or two because it takes him a while to recover. They bring the stool in. 3 minutes later, they finally get Robbie up on the stool and now everybody's like, holy shit, Herb, what an asshole. Didn't you see his hand fall down?
That's right.
Can't you tell that he lost consciousness?
That's
That's what, as a referee, those guys have to fucking deal with. That no matter what decision they make, at the time, we have the advantage of fucking replay.
Yeah.
Looking back going, well, what if, I mean, they're looking at it because, again, we're so fucking scared guys are going to get hurt. Herb lets that go a little bit longer, and then all of a sudden now we're having the same conversation, but like, oh, man, Herb, man, fucking, did you see Robbie piss himself? I mean, because that shit happens in a choke if you're in there for too long. I've been at jiu-jitsu tournaments. White gi turns yellow because a guy's been in a choke for too long. Referees aren't quite as vetted. And mistakes happen. You see a guy, his eyes are open. You're like, oh, he's fighting it. Oh, no, he's out. Oh, shit. You stop the fight. Now the guy pisses himself.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, just to apply a layman's look to it, the way I saw it, I immediately noticed when that arm flopped. That thumbs up, I had to see somebody zooming in and slowing it down and showing me. So when I think back to as I was watching it real time, I definitely had a moment of, oh, his arm flopped. I think he's out. Yeah. Versus, wait, no, he's giving a thumbs up right there. One of them, I had to have it like forensically shown to me, and the other one I noticed right away. So I don't, in the pantheon of bad stoppages, I don't really think this is.
It's not a bad stop. It's unfortunate. I think it kind of robs. I think it hurts. It takes more from Ben Askren. It kind of sucks for him, because it's like, I had the choke. Nah, Herb stopped it. You didn't really have the choke. To be on the winning end of that, it sucks too, because it's like you don't even really get it. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't even really get credit for a victory, surviving an onslaught and coming through. I don't think that even if they rematch, Ben Askren, I feel, is still going to beat Robbie Lawler. Unless he catches him with a punch coming in. His wrestling is just on a level with his grappling, with his submissions, and just, and his control, that there's just stylistically, that 99 out of 100 times Askren's beaten Robbie Lawler.
I'd be happy to see this fight again. I know I know Dana said he wanted to do it again. There was a lot of talk of a rematch. I'd be good with that, and I thought it was a great debut from Ben Askren. I mean, here you've got a guy that's coming in with a lot of hype. He's never fought in the UFC. Does he really belong in the big show? And obviously, without a doubt, he does. So other than the controversial outcome of the fight, not only did it look good for Askren, Lawler looked good at the beginning of the fight. I mean, you can't even, that was impressive as well. So it would make a lot of sense to me to have these guys fight again. The fight of the night was actually former Bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt getting knocked out with 6 seconds to spare in the first round by Pedro Munoz. This fight was a brawl while it lasted, and what I want to ask you about as it pertains to Cody Garbrandt is this. I knew Pedro Munoz was going to be tough going in there, but Cody Garbrandt, who I think is one of the best boxers in the UFC. Certainly that's where a big part of his pedigree and his background comes from. He is a guy who can get drawn into a firefight. We've seen it with TJ Dillashaw, and now we saw it with Munoz. It's part of what makes him so exciting. It's part of what has led to victories leading up to his title reign. But this one I saw coming. This one I could see where it was like, oh man, he's, this round could go either way, and now here comes the firefight, and it's one of those things where, now it's going to turn into a matter of basically who takes the last punch, who takes the last hard punch, and in this case, it was Garbrandt. You think that is a flaw in Garbrandt's game, or do you think it's the kind of thing where it's like, look, for better or for worse, that's part of who you are and what's gotten you here?
Well, no, I mean, it is a flaw. And the problem is that up until his last two opponents, if he stands toe-to-toe with somebody and they're swinging at him and he's swinging at them, it's worked out in his favor. So he's had positive affirmation in his brain that, well, if we go and start throwing, haymakers at each other, I'm going to come out on the winning side. And now he's had 3 fights in a row where that hasn't been the case. So that when he gets into a brawl, he's had too many times, again, that it's like building a bad habit. Like, if you do something but get away with it, how do I correct you on it? And he won the bantamweight title fighting like that. And so it's just not enough time, I think, for him to sit there and go, shit, I need to pull back, adjust. And you see it in fighters that fight long enough. I mean, Muhammad Ali fought differently after he came back from, than he fought before he was stripped of the title and did 4 years. That's how great fighters have to be. They have to make adjustments. And I think that's what we're seeing with Garbrandt. I understood why he didn't make adjustments in his second fight with TJ Dillashaw, because he knocked him cold, but TJ was able to recover in their first fight. And then TJ comes back and catches him. So I can see why when he goes back to camp, it was a fluke. Okay. But then in the second fight, when he got caught with pretty much the same exact punch, hey, when you're throwing a shot, you run right into punches, and he runs right into a right hook both times now. I thought, okay, now he's going to go back to the drawing board and fix this. Then to see it the third time, I'm like, well, at what point are you not identifying that, you lead with your chin when you're brawling with guys, especially when he throws off the backside. You see that he brings his face first, then throws a shot. That's why other people hitting him so hard, it's not that he doesn't have a good chin. It's that when he explodes and throws a shot, all that power that he's throwing on you, he's also running into punches and basically throwing his chin at your hand. And so that's something that he has to be more calculated about and make adjustments. And I think now, 3 times in a row, I think that he's probably going to have to go home and sit there and go, I have to stop being lulled into these brawls. If I do brawl, maybe I can brawl going off the lead side and not using so much my backside. That seems to be exposing me more. Maybe I'll do this. You know, there's corrections he can try to make, but he has to just reference and wire it that way.
Zabit Magomed Sharipov defeats Jeremy Stephens via decision. This was the biggest level of competition in Zabit's career so far. This is a guy who I don't know that there's a bigger blue chip prospect in the entire UFC right now. You go back with him to ACB, right?
Yeah.
You watch him fight in ACB. He decisions Jeremy Stephens. He looks great doing it. And now I think with this guy, Frank, we've got to start talking about, you know, a couple of top contenders away from a title shot, maybe. I mean,
I think so. I think Jeremy Stephens was a good gatekeeper type of fight. I think now he does have to put a contender on that list so he can vie for a title. Yep.
Very impressive out of Zabit. So if you don't already know the name, start practicing pronouncing it now. You watching this guy Johnny Walker?
No.
This Brazilian Johnny Walker, the light heavyweight. This guy, he gets a performance of the night bonus, knocking out
the flying knee.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Knocking out Misha Serkinov in 37 seconds. Injures himself doing some sort of worm dance celebration there at the end. Injures his shoulder. Hopefully that's nothing too lingering. This guy's an exciting fighter, and he's fighting frequently. He's getting finishes. He's kind of goofy and kind of quirky and kind of funny, and I think the UFC has another star on their hands there for sure. So a performance of the night bonus for him, looking good doing it. How about old Diego Sanchez? Gets himself a performance of the night win for a second round finish of Mickey Gall, a guy who, you know, came in the UFC as the somewhat anonymous opponent to CM Punk, but has since proven to be a pretty decent fighter. Gets finished by Diego Sanchez. I mean, Diego Sanchez, Ultimate Fighter Season 1. I mean, the guy that wasn't Forrest Griffin that came out of Season 1 a winner is still fighting in the UFC. And just when you think, you know, maybe Diego's at the end of his run, there was nothing coming out of Saturday night's fight to me that indicated that Diego Sanchez would at this point want to retire. He had a very strong, dominant win. He's got to be late 30s. Hang on, I'll tell you exactly. What are your thoughts on Diego at this point?
Well, I mean, he has a good work ethic. I think that's one thing that he's allowed to. And
37.
Yeah, and seems to be able to keep driving through. But, you know, I think if he keeps facing Mickey Gall level competition, he can still fight well. As far as do I think that he could ever work himself back up to a title shot? No, I think that, you know, his intensity and stuff and his game, it never really evolved too much to where people can sit there and go, well, add this. His stand-up looks the same. His grappling is a great foundation. But as far as competing against the elite guys, I don't see that ever happening again.
But I think that's okay. I think he's at a weight class where there will always be a demand for a tough out like him. You know, I mean, he's at a level now, or he's at a weight class where, I mean, just look at what just happened with Zabit and Jeremy Stephens. I mean, you need Jeremy Stephens. You need that guy who is going to, you know, be, I don't know, it's just necessarily have to be relegated to a gatekeeper, but there's going to be fighters like Mickey Gall who need fights.
The expression journeyman.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you're going to need, I mean, he is still to this day tailor-made for the feature bout of the prelims, for example, that are going to be on ESPN. And then that's an important role to serve these days. I mean, you know, when you're on a big network like that, there's a reason why they put a guaranteed exciting fighter in what should be a really good fight as the last thing you're going to see before hopefully you buy that pay-per-view. That's I think that is a very respectable position to be in as a fighter, especially at Diego's age and with his pedigree. Let's talk about this weekend's main event, which is going to feature former heavyweight champion and a former opponent of yours, Junior Dos Santos, taking on the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis coming up short in his heavyweight title shot against Daniel Cormier. You know, Lewis is a guy who, to me, I think I've said maybe a couple of Derrick Lewis fights ago, the way to beat him is to out-technical him, you know, and that's what happened with Cormier. That's what could very likely happen with Dos Santos. However, there is no one who can look more exhausted and yet have more in the tank left than Derrick Lewis, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. And Lewis is extremely tough on top of being a really good athlete. I think in this fight I'm still taking Dos Santos, not, you know, for the reason being is that I think Lewis's back, for whatever reason, affects his conditioning level. So, and even in the fight against Volkov, Lewis was losing, and it was more or less Volkov going for the finish that exposed himself to be hit. Here's the thing. I don't think Dos Santos will go for the finish. Dos Santos is, you know, he would knock him out if he exposes himself, but Dos Santos is very happy stylistically moving around, jabbing you, hitting you with hard shots, and then moving out of danger. Dos Santos doesn't really expose himself too much. And I'm thinking after his last fight with Miocic, probably even inclined to do so even less. So as far as technically, Dos Santos is the more technical striker. He's lighter, he moves around better, and I don't think he's going to take any chances. Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that, you know, I guess on paper should be Junior Dos Santos's fight to lose, but that being said, like I said, if there is anybody who has more of an X factor that comes along with him than Derrick Lewis, I don't know exactly who that would be. Now, Dos Santos is on a 2-fight win streak. You mentioned his loss to Stipe. Since then, he's had a pair of wins over Blagoy Ivanov. That went to decision back in July. And then he had a TKO over Tai Tuivasa at the end of December. There's another guy I see. Dos Santos is 35 years old at this point. So that's going to be a main event this weekend on ESPN Plus. This actually starts a run of a couple of, man, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks where there's fights on that ESPN Plus. I've kind of, you know, I've been saying for the last few weeks, I was trying to figure out where UFC Fight Pass was going to fall in all this of being affected by the ESPN Plus app. And it looks like with pay-per-views, you're still going to get the early prelims on the Fight Pass. But with now it seems like the cards that were for a time being shown on UFC's Fight Pass, like those Fight Pass only cards, it seems like those are kind of now going to ESPN Plus. So, yeah. So anyway, it's definitely going to be a requirement for UFC fans to have that $5 a month pass. All right. So hopefully next week we're going to have Mikey back. Mikey has been working a lot, so we've been taping during the day, so we haven't been able to have a producer, which means we haven't been able to have a proper news segment. Hopefully we'll have him back next week. But I do have a couple of quick things to throw at you where that's concerned. One, I texted you this the other night. Have you seen yet the HBO Michael Jackson documentary?
I didn't watch it yet.
You guys got to watch this because we're in a phase now where we're just being continually shocked. One by the R. Kelly series.
Well, no one's shocked that Michael Jackson.
Well, not shocked, no, right? But still, when you
because if he was innocent, he's the most guilty-looking innocent motherfucker I've ever seen.
I'm just telling you, when you see this thing, yeah, you already know all that, but it's just like the depth and intensity. Basically, it's built around two guys. It's these two guys who testified in his defense in his trial. They weren't guys that had like the out-of-court settlements or whatever. They weren't accusers. They testified in his defense, and they have come out and said, okay, we didn't tell the truth about all that. Here's everything that really happened. But it shows you, like, really the depths of abuse like that, like how someone can, because a lot of people would mistakenly think, oh, yeah, well, if something like that happens to you, you just would tell somebody that it happened and know what's happening to you right away and realize you're being abused. And a big part of that documentary is these kids going, no, I was 7 and I did not understand a lot of this is bad, here's what's happening. It gets all confusing in your head.
It's so weird to me, and I'm going to have to watch it so we can talk more about it. But a little bit with the R. Kelly, and I'm just in the same category of everybody else. Hearing that he married, I remember being in high school and hearing that. Oh, he married, Rihanna. Aaliyah. And then, some of the songs, Age Isn't Nothing But a Number that, he, helped with, and some of his songs. I'm sitting there going, holy shit, like, no one thought that was weird, Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't think it was weird either. But I do know that even from the very first time that I seen that Michael Jackson hung out with kids, I thought that was fucking weird. Do you know what I mean? Like, even to this day, if some guy knocked on my door and goes, hey, can me and Ronan play? I'm all, how fucking old are you? You know what I mean? Like, I'm leery of a teenager wanting to play with my son.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm like, wait a minute. Like, if you're... There's about a 3-year age gap that I find acceptable when kids play with each other. You start pushing past that, a 15-year-old shouldn't want to play with a 10-year-old. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like my alarms start firing off. I'm like, okay, is your 15-year-old special needs and has the IQ of a 7-year-old? Well, then maybe I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it and the thing is, what all this had in common, and you'll see this when you watch the series, is that none of it happens if parents don't allow their kid to sleep in the same bed with an adult male stranger. Like, if not for that, and that's the same thing with R. Kelly. It's like, I
mean, that's spend the night. I mean, even to fucking hang out.
Yeah.
I find that weird. Like, even when they said the thing, I remember very vividly as a kid, whenever it was, I was a teenager, seeing him come off an airplane one time with kids with him.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there going, if they're not family, what fucking full-grown man hangs out with little kids? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's not natural. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be like, as a married man, if all of a sudden you saw me hanging out with 5 different girls all in their 20s and be like, what's wrong with that? Oh, and they're like, hey, Mir's always hanging out with all these. He has his fucking secretary, his handler, his social media. Well, you hired a bunch of 20-year-olds. You're telling me you're not going to sit there and go, well, he's fucking them. No shit. You know what I mean? Like,
or how about this? He's not fucking them. They do all sleep in the same bed when they travel on the road. That's true. But
I don't see that going very well at home. Honey, I swear to God, it saves money on the hotels. I tell you, leave. She's on her way. Fucking run.
Yeah. I mean, it's but and to me, you watch these parents interviewed, and you watch the bargains they make with themselves. Where they
don't get too much more into it.
No,
because I want to watch it too. So we can revisit this on equal terms.
It's an investment, of time. But watch it. It's a 2-part episode, and then there's Oprah actually does an interview with these two guys after it, like the after show or whatever you would call it. She sits down with the guys for an hour after they've all watched the film and talks about questions she has from the film. So it's really interesting. All right.
I wonder if he's going to get the same, because it's funny because Michael Jackson's much more endeared to people than R. Kelly. Not that R. Kelly doesn't have a fan base, but I mean, Michael Jackson is a super god,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And with them taking R. Kelly's music off and all this stuff, like, is there going to be a boycott of the Michael Jackson music? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit there and go like, well, I hate to break the news to everybody. They're both fucking pedophiles. They're both the same. You know what I mean? Like,
you know what? And this is something that would have to be looked into. But if you're really concerned about rewarding bad behavior in terms of like not listening to music or whatever, find out who owns the publishing to the music, because that's who's making the money. Like, if I know he had a lot of financial issues, he may have sold that publishing to somebody.
Oh, okay.
And in that case, somebody's making the money that's not the estate. It's worth looking into. But I will say this, that to the point you just made, I think what benefited him in terms of deflecting suspicion a lot of times was in contrast to R. Kelly, who's this like, everything is sex and I'm an alpha male, you know, and I'm doing all this. Michael, he looks like a guy you could snap in over your knee, you know.
well, he looked like a fucking alien. He was like a fairy. Like,
He
he
looked
was
like
something
that.
just.
Yeah.
He wasn't masculine. So I think that lack of masculinity allowed people to feel safer with him. But that's why I remember when he had the babies and they were born. I don't know if they've ever proven this or not, but there's no way that biologically are his children.
The mother says they never had sex. She's publicly said that was
because I remember when they
somehow-
first were born, and again, as young as I was at the time, I'm looking at it, I'm like going, hey, that doesn't look like a half black baby to me. I mean, I know you have different ranges of when you're, you know, half black to half white when you have a baby. But I'm like, there's just no way. That's a fucking white baby. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they go, well, I'm like, hold on. You're just, because you're thinking of what Michael Jackson looks like. That's not what he looks like.
Yeah.
Genetically, look at his dad and his brothers. They're black.
Yeah.
That's what his kids should look like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they haven't had surgery yet.
Yeah.
They haven't been bleached. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like, I remember I look at that, was Paris or Blanket, whoever. I'm all, that ain't his fucking kid. There's no way.
Speaking of the dad, Joe Jackson, he's dead now, fairly recently dead. But that's the guy. Like, I know Michael Jackson's an adult, certainly responsible for his own actions, all that kind of stuff. But that's also one of those situations where, to me, you ought to be able to watch that documentary, and every time something shocking happens, just reach over and smack Joe Jackson one time. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, that guy fucked up his kids too.
I've heard some horrible stories. Like, he sold, you know, basically let people use Michael for prostitution purposes and stuff. Like, I've heard some horrendous shit.
Well, watch the documentary and you can tell me what you think. All right, one more thought for you. I have been teasing a hypothetical for you for a couple of weeks. I'm going to throw it out. If you have if you know right away where you come down on this, you can tell me. If you think maybe you need to think about it, we could table it and get into it next episode, next week, whatever you want to do. But is that me or you?
That's me.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my time limit.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'll tell you what. I'm going to I'll give it to you.
Okay.
And you think about it.
Am I
We'll
responsible?
have our listeners think about it, and then we'll tease it for the next episode. I'm pretty proud of this one. Okay. All right. Everybody knows Colin Kaepernick controversy.
Yeah.
Okay. Takes a knee for the national anthem. Can't get on with the football team. Just recently settled out of court with the NFL. And so they've reached some sort of financial settlement. But obviously there are a lot of people, football fans, who it didn't matter, dogfighting, domestic dispute, shooting each other, rapes, whatever, that kept them watching the NFL when that thing is penitentiary. But when a guy starts kneeling for the national anthem and then some other guys follow suit, there were a lot of people who were like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm drawing a line. I'm boycotting the NFL. So very polarizing issue. And I know you are opposed to the idea of that, right?
Yes.
Of somebody doing it.
I think there's always a platform to discuss, but at some point we have to be united on something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel that the flag, what it represents as the U.S. as a government, we have to be united that at least you can criticize but still respect.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, shit, there's guys, I mean, hell, when a soldier comes back from overseas, they put a flag over his casket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what you take a knee to? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I just think, you know, that's why I have an issue with it.
And for me, while I I think they have a right to do it, and I don't think that's the kind of thing. If that's what you're going to do on the NFL sidelines, then that's what you're going to do. I don't have a problem with the fact that they're deciding to do it. That would not be my choice of protest. I want you to listen to me, and I feel like there's certain things that if I do something, it can be so polarizing that now you're just not listening.
That's what I think. I think it's so disrespectful that you have the right to your freedom of speech. But if the act of what you're doing is so disrespectful to me, even if I was trying to, if I'm on your side, like, hey, okay, I agree with what your message is, but you're going to do what to get people to listen to you? I'd be like, that's a really bad idea.
Wouldn't be my choice of protest. But here's the hypothetical. All right. So you have 3 kids. You would want them to stand for the national anthem. You're going to be upset if, for whatever reason, one or more of them go to the NFL and they're taking knees on national television. I'm sure that would be a tough pill for you to swallow. All right, here's my hypothetical. You can have your kid play in the NFL, and for whatever reason, that's going to be their decision, and they're going to take a knee during the national anthem. Okay. However, they're going to be very civically minded, and they are going to exercise their right to vote every time an election comes up. Or they will stand with their hand over their heart for every national anthem, but they're never going to vote. They don't participate in the process. What do you think is less American?
I will need some time to think about this one.
It's a good one, right?
It is a good one.
Okay. So let's table it. Let's give some thought, and let's debate it on the next.
Put between 2 things that really upset me.
Yeah, I know. It's like one is, which one is actually more American? Which one is actually more substantial in terms of, action speaking louder than words? So. Or one action speaking louder than another action. In fact, all of our listeners can think about it too. If you guys want to message us with your thoughts over the next week, you can contact us through our Phone Booth Fighting Facebook page, and we'll read some of those thoughts on the air. We'll work them into the debate. We'll see where Frank sits on it, and I'll tell you what my thoughts are. We'll do it all next week on Phone Booth Fighting, so that'll give us a little homework, something to look forward to. So, Frank, I mentioned the Phone Booth Fighting Facebook page. Tell everybody the other places they can find us on social media.
Facebook and Instagram, Phone Booth Fighting. Snapchat, Twitter at Phone Booth Fight.
All right. Don't forget to click through that Amazon banner on the front of phoneboothfighting.com. Why, Frank?
Because then you won't be in the same category as my fucking wife.
Uh-oh.
Spends thousands of dollars a month and will not use the banner. Fucking drives me insane.
Yeah.
But I use the banner. Good. I just was ordering. Every time I click on, I save the icon on my phone for Phone Booth Fighting. I click through Amazon, go through. So when I purchase all the things that I need for my house, or whatever, pads for the kids, shoulder pads, new football helmet, whatever I'm grabbing, a small percentage comes back here to the show to help out at no extra cost to me.
That's it. We appreciate it. Remember to give us those 5 stars on iTunes when you look up Phone Booth Fighting. For Frank Mir, I'm Richard Hunter, and we will see you right back here next week on Phone Booth Fighting.